The Americans had occupied Saddam's palace in the center of Baghdad, but the Iraqi dictator himself remained elusive. That afternoon, the Americans got another intelligence tip.
My boss came into the office and he said to me, "Hey Mark, we've got some intelligence, we know where Saddam is."
There would be a meeting at these coordinates in these buildings, and it would be populated by extremely high-level players within the Ba'ath Party and within the Iraqi leadership structure.
By now, Garlasco was growing wary of such tips.
I think that the evidence was sketchy. It was good enough to send forces in on the ground and see if he's really there, but I was reticent to drop 8,000 pounds of high explosives.
His objections were overruled. The intelligence was quickly passed to the crew of a B-1 bomber, already in the air over central Iraq.
We were told, turn direct Baghdad, we've got a priority 1 leadership target for you, and stand by for coordinates. And the words we got were basically, this is a big one, don't miss.
The target was in the wealthy Al-Mansur district in the west of Baghdad. Abdul Masih had just returned home for lunch.
Everything was normal. People were just moving around as normal. I had my lunch, and then half an hour later, I went out again.
In the skies above Baghdad, the intelligence passed to the B-1 was less precise than usual.
We actually got 2 sets of coordinates about 100 feet apart. My guess is that whoever was making these decisions looked at the buildings and thought, well, just to play it safe, to make sure that we do get the people we're after, we're gonna hit two separate target points there.
One of the target points was Abdul Masih's home.
We annihilated that target area. Emotionally, there's just a couple moments to think, wow, okay, we did that, now let's move on to the next target area.
Here was the first victim we dug out from my own family. Here in the middle, we found Mariam, my niece, Malana, my older daughter. Then we got to the kitchen, where we found my wife, my little daughter, Lana. I dug them out with my bare hands. I carried them with my own hands. And I buried them with my own hands.
The Americans had missed again. 18 civilians died instead. The attack was based on an intercept of a satellite phone. These intercepts can be traced to within a radius of 100 meters of where the phone is being used. A human source on the ground was needed to point towards a more precise location. It now seems almost certain this source pointed to the wrong house.
I think the way that we went at it, the intelligence that we had, maybe was not as good as we thought it was.
The bulk of the other leadership strikes during the war were based on similarly flawed intelligence. 50 attempts were made to kill Iraqi leaders. Not a single one was successful.
The targets were all struck. Whatever the U.S. aimed at was hit, and hit magnificently. Buildings destroyed, smoking holes in the ground, that sort of thing. The problem is, the people who the U.S. was aiming at were not there. These leadership strikes led to the highest number of civilian casualties in the air war.
Did I expect to kill a lot of leaders? No. But We wanted to strike those facilities that they could man out of, and we wanted to put them on the run. So there may be a 3 to 4% chance that I'm actually going to strike the leader, but it is very well worth it attacking him.
If it was their families here, would they give approval to attack and destroy them? I'm alone. My children, my family, they all died here. Only I am left.
So where was Saddam? In fact, he'd spent much of the war at this house, about a mile away. It was never targeted. The day after the Al-Mansur strike, Saddam told close followers here that he'd been betrayed. Then he fled to the north of the city. There, on April the 9th, far from feeling hounded by airstrikes, he felt confident enough to stage another walkabout.
I'd always hoped to meet him. I wished him victory, and he thanked me. He handed me his gun by the handle. It had the president's seal on it. He said, "We'll come back in a month's time and collect it. But if we don't show up, it's yours." I said to him, "God willing, you will be back." He called on the people to resist the Americans, saying they were cowards, that we would defeat them and make Baghdad their grave.
Machine guns were handed out to the local people. Then Saddam went to the local mosque to pray. While he was there, someone tipped off the Americans. A Marine company was dispatched to capture the Iraqi leader. The defenders of the mosque put up fanatical resistance.
The closer we got to the mosque, the more I was convinced that he might actually be there, because the contact was so severe and it was so well defended, and the soldiers in that vicinity were so motivated and dedicated to die.
There were fighters from the People's Army, party loyalists. Each had their own weapon. One would have a rifle, another a grenade thrower. They attacked them from the side streets, from among the trees. Many people from our side were killed, martyred.
The Americans forced their way into the mosque. But when the final defenders surrendered, the Iraqi dictator had slipped through the net. It was the last time he'd be seen for 247 days. In the center of Baghdad, all that was left for the Americans was to end the last desperate resistance. For the Iraqi military, it was a humiliation.
History will have no mercy on us, and it has a filthy tongue. At all levels, from the high command of the armed forces, right down to the lowest level of command, we all failed in our duty.
The Fedayeen and the Ba'ath Party militias had fought, often fanatically. But it was street gangs against soldiers. In the end, they had been almost alone.
There was a tank commander in our brigade. He told the president that he wanted to change the name of his unit to Al Samud, the unit which struggles. In the end, he didn't fire a single shot at the Americans, and all his tanks were captured.
When it came to it, the professional soldiers understood the odds against them, and they weren't prepared to die for Saddam. They didn't mutiny or even surrender en masse, as the Americans had hoped. But nor did they fight. They simply went home. It was a passive revolution.
I don't have the exact figures, but I don't think more than 15% of the armed forces actually fought. Even so, we managed to resist for 3 weeks. What if everybody had been fighting?
The American columns now rolled into Baghdad, but there were few of the triumphal scenes they had hoped for. The people of Baghdad were wary, suspicious. They may have hated Saddam, but that didn't make them pro-American. Only now was this truth dawning. And the American conduct of the war had done little to win them over.
If people are told that the war is going to be precise, and then they see time and again that civilians are being injured and killed, then obviously they believe that they're being targeted.
No one knows how many civilians died. Estimates vary between 4,000 and 10,000. It's likely that on the Iraqi side, more civilians died than fighters. On April the 9th, Colonel McCoy, the man who had seized the Diyala Bridge, rolled into Baghdad's central square.
The Iraqis had gathered around the statue and were throwing their shoes at it.
The crowd was small, but the square quickly filled with journalists, anxious at last to capture the iconic images of victory.
They had produced a rope and were trying to haul it down using manpower. It was obvious it wasn't going to happen, and all the cameras were rolling. So I thought it would be a pretty anticlimactic moment if we didn't help.
McCoy offered up one of the Marines' heavy vehicles. At 5 p.m., the statue came down.
And at that point, they went nuts on it and tore the head off and drug it around the streets.
The pictures quickly flashed around the world. But elsewhere, Baghdad was slipping into chaos. As in Basra, looting quickly spread, even to hospitals. It was soon clear the fall of Baghdad had exposed the coalition's final, fateful miscalculation.
We expected there to be some degree of infrastructure left in the city in terms of intellectual infrastructure, in terms of running the city infrastructure, in terms of running the government infrastructure.
You had no Iraqi institutions to kind of co-opt into this. No Iraqi army, no Iraqi police, prisoners let out of prison, no local or national government organizations, ministries didn't exist.
There was nobody to receive the surrender from. We couldn't find them. They weren't there.
The war had been based on the expectation that the Iraqi people and the Iraqi army would be the coalition's allies in overthrowing Saddam, but they weren't. They had simply stood aside.
When you decapitated the regime, everything below it fell apart.
Now the generals found they would have to win the peace on their own as well. But the politicians hadn't planned for this, and the generals didn't have enough troops. The invasion was over. The war was just beginning. Over the next few months, a violent insurgency flowed into the vacuum left by the collapse of authority. Exiled politicians had persuaded the Americans they would be greeted as saviors and would run the country. But it turned out they had little local support. By the autumn, more American soldiers had died than during the conflict itself. And they still couldn't find Saddam.
It was very difficult to convince people that Saddam gone forever. They have experienced this before, when Saddam has disappeared and then reappeared again. Still, there was deep-rooted fears in the hearts and minds of people.
Then, in December, came a breakthrough.
A report came in that the target was just north of the city of Adwar. So the objective area is about 15 kilometers southeast of Tikrit.
For 8 months, American troops had searched fruitlessly for Saddam Hussein around his hometown of Tikrit. But that evening, an Iraqi prisoner had broken under questioning. He said he knew where Saddam Hussein was hiding.
I wanted to use the cover of darkness because of our estimate that there would be some security elements around Saddam Hussein. We absolutely had to be prepared for a fight.
This was no chance tip-off. At the American headquarters, a massive intelligence operation had been underway for months. The unexpected course of the war had shown the American military that everything they thought they knew about Iraq and its people was wrong. To break into Saddam's world, they had to start from scratch.
I had to get into the mindset, find out what he thinks, how they live and operate, why they do the things they do. Found that we tend to Americanize things here, and that was kind of a problem.
They noticed Saddam had always been protected by the same group of middle-aged and often overweight bodyguards.
We began to call these guys the 42-inch waistline guys. They were tough guys. Most of them had done a lot of killing, murder. They were feared. They could protect Saddam. We determined that they still were.
They raided the bodyguards' houses in search of family documents and photographs.
We began to go after those that were in the photographs, those that were in the documents. We began to see a series of families that kept coming up in this inner circle.
By autumn, they discovered Saddam's protectors were always drawn from just 5 extended families who lived around Tikrit.
That was the breakthrough, because then you could start tracking who it is you needed to look for.
All of our forces combined began to take these family members out one at a time. Over time, one would lead to the other, and the swamp began to drain.
By December the 13th, Saddam had run out of allies. It was a member of one of the 5 families, a former secret policeman, who broke under interrogation and said he knew where Saddam was hiding. Troops quickly surrounded a small country farmhouse. Moments later, word came through. A man had been detained.
Members of the Special Forces Operation Group were escorting out a detainee. And this detainee had his hands bound, and he had a hood over his head so that he could not see, nor other people could not see him.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
He surrendered without a shot. Gave up, introduced himself as the president of Iraq, stated unequivocally he was willing to negotiate. He was a little bit disoriented. His hairstyle and changed a bit, but it was Saddam Hussein, tall man. He was also able to confirm certain other characteristics, small tattoos, etc.
Saddam Hussein was captured Saturday, December 13th at about 8:30 p.m. local in a cellar in the town of Adwar, which is about 15 kilometers south of Tikrit.
A small group of leading Iraqis was taken to see Saddam. For the first time in 35 years, they could confront him about his crimes.
When I went in the room, I saw very miserable, broken, demoralized person, if you like. I asked him, why did you do the mass graves? Hundreds of thousands of people underground. He said, have you asked their relatives? They were thieves. They were escapees from the military service. I said, what about Anfal, when you kill hundreds of thousands of Kurds? He just turned his face around, away from me.
But today, in Iraq, the American raids continue. Iraqi resistance continues. And British and American soldiers continue to die.
Sit down. Sit.
The images speak of occupation, not liberation.
On your knees. Okay.
Almost a year on, the legacy of how the war was planned and how it was fought still shape Iraq.